Hi there, Jerry Detweiler, Education Director for NAV here. And today we're going to talk about the new PPP and new EIDL grants that are part of the stimulus bill. As of this moment, we're waiting for the president to sign it, but he's indicated he will. So we expect this to become law very, very soon. So here's what's in the new bill. And first, I want to give you a caveat. I've read the legislation. There's a lot to it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. Can't provide you with legal or financial or tax advice. What I can try to do is help you understand what's in there so that you can prepare to apply when these new PPP loans and EIDL grants are available. We do expect, just like with the first round of PPP and EIDL, that the SBA will come out with additional regulations or additional guidance. So we expect that we don't have all the answers now, but hopefully they will be coming, hopefully faster than last time. I do think we're in a better place than we were with PPP round one, so sit tight. All right, so first of all, what is it? So the new PPP loans are very similar to round one PPP loans. They are a loan that's really designed primarily for payroll, and they're based on 2.5 times average monthly payroll. So just like with PPP round one, you look at the compensation for yourself, your employees, you can add in certain costs. And in fact, this legislation clarifies that payroll can also include group health, dental, vision, I think disability insurance, but don't quote me on the last one. And so there are a few additional costs that fall into that bucket. And if you're a newer business, they have some new calculations to help you understand how much you might qualify for. And we've outlined that all in a detailed article on the NAV blog, just at nav.com/blog, that goes into detail about these, how you figure out how much you can get. And then similar to PPP round one, how much you spend and what you spend it on will affect how much is forgiven. Now, there is a new caveat to this bill and a couple of new caveats, and they're really designed to make sure that these loans this time go to smaller, hard-hit businesses and not the big businesses the big small businesses that got so much attention in round one. So for example, publicly traded companies are not allowed to apply in this round. And the number of employees has been capped at 300 instead of 500. So that's a big difference. In addition, your business, if you want to apply in this round, either for a second PPP loan or for your first PPP loan, both are acceptable, then you have to demonstrate that your business had at least a 25% revenue drop in one quarter in 2020 compared to 2019. Now, if you're a newer business, there's actually different look back periods. So we detail that again in the article at nav.com/blog. But generally, you're saying a comparable quarter. So let's say the second quarter of 2020, which was a really, really tough quarter for so many businesses, you compare that to your second quarter in 2019, and if your revenues drop by at least 25%, then that would check that mark, presumably for that particular qualification. Another thing that I will add, we have gotten some questions about this. Your PPP loan that you got, if you got one in the second quarter of 2020, that doesn't count. That we're talking about your business revenues. So that's good to know as well. So then you have to, for full forgiveness, you have to spend the money 60% on payroll and payroll-related costs, and up to 40% on other costs. Now that traditionally in the CARES Act, and this is still the case for this round, includes rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. But they've also added these new categories of expenses that can count in that 40%. It's kind of long and detailed, so I'm not going to go into each one, but basically these are expenses that are related to your business surviving this crisis. And so there's several covered expenses. Just a brief example would be certain PPE, protective devices for your employees, or for if you put up sneeze guards in your location or a drive-through window or certain things like that. Those are included in those expenses. Also, if your business was impacted by the civil unrest earlier this year and insurance didn't cover it all, that would also be a qualification for that category of expenses. And so just like with round one, you're going to spend those in this bill. It says from 8 to 24 weeks after you get the money. So you have the choice. You can cut it off. You can cut off the time you spend it, and then apply for forgiveness at 12 weeks or 13 weeks or whatever you choose. And so you have that range, and then you have to demonstrate that you spent at least 60% for payroll-related expenses, 40% for those other expenses, qualified expenses, and then you can apply for forgiveness. Now, we were hoping in this round that there would be automatic forgiveness for smaller loans, $150,000 or less. Didn't get that. What we did get is a very simplified application for loans of $150,000 or less. So your application that the SBA still needs to come out with, I think they have 24 days after the bill becomes law to come out with that simplified application. You're just going to check a few boxes about the size of the loan and how many jobs you retained and how much payroll was spent, et cetera. And once you do that, you can apply for forgiveness. It's going to be very streamlined. However, I want to give you a big important heads up here. You must keep good records because the SBA can audit your loan to see whether you spent it on the appropriate types of expenses in the appropriate period of time. So even if you're using the simplified application, you need to document it. One thing we're recommending is that you open a separate bank account. We recommended this round one. We'll recommend it again. Open a separate bank account to deposit these funds. Then you have at least a very clear track record of where that money goes because you're paying it out of this separate bank account. So that's just something to keep in mind. And again, we'll wait for those new simplified PPP applications to come out. I should also add that simplified application, as well as some of the additional expenses that qualify, are retroactive to any PPP loan that has been made under the CARES Act as long as it hasn't been forgiven. If it's been forgiven, I don't believe you are eligible to add it with those expenses. Now, I've already mentioned that you can get a new loan or you can get a second loan if you qualify. There's another provision in there that if you didn't get the full amount that you qualified for in round one, or if you returned all or part of your first PPP and you changed your mind, you can reapply for that money. I can tell you that at NAV, we fielded questions from borrowers who applied and didn't understand how much they actually qualified for. So for example, maybe the owner left their payroll off of the application, only applied based on their employees and left their own compensation off the application. That person presumably can go back and reapply to have that amount included and get additional money from the PPP round one. So that's also an interesting tweak to it. Now, here's some really good news that I'm super excited about is the fact that this legislation clarifies that EIDL, or Economic Injury Disaster Loans, which the grants that people got up to $1,000 per employee are not taxable. And they've also clarified that while PPP money is not taxable, and Congress has already said that, we've already known that, they also say for both loans, you can now, if you spend the money on qualified business expenses that would be tax deductible, you can take that tax deduction. So a lot of businesses were up in arms near the end of last month, because the IRS came out and said, well, we're not going to tax you on the forgiven PPP loan, although technically forgiven income is usually taxable, but we're not going to let you deduct the expenses that you paid for. And so that pushed some businesses into higher tax brackets, and they were facing some pretty significant tax bills as a result. So now EIDL grants are not taxable, and the PPP funds are not taxable. And with both, you can spend that money on deductible expenses and still take the tax deduction if you qualify. Great news. Another piece of great news is that the EIDL grant will no longer be subtracted from PPP for forgiveness purposes. So I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine applied for the EIDL grant. She got $1,000. She also applied for a PPP. She got it. She applied for forgiveness, and they forgave all but the $1,000 that went toward EIDL. Well, that left her with a $1,000 loan. And granted, she was still grateful, but it wasn't quite what Congress intended. So no longer is that the case. And if you're like my friend and you already got your PPP loan forgiven and the EIDL grant was subtracted, the SBA is going to come out with instructions on how you can get that subtraction wiped out so that your full PPP loan is forgiven if you otherwise qualify for full PPP forgiveness. So that's also excellent news. All right, I'm just going to touch real quick. Those are the main things I want you to know about PPP. I'm going to touch real quick on a couple of other things. There's $20 billion in this bill for EIDL grants. So that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And let's just shift back to March 27th, 2020. Remember, the CARES Act created this $1,000 advance. So if you applied for an economic injury disaster loan, you could request, according to the CARES Act, up to $1,000 in a grant that was supposed to be made in 3 days. Completely unrealistic. That did not happen. But the SBA and Treasury came out and said, we're going to make that $10,000, $1,000 per employee. So a lot of businesses felt really gypped by that. And some didn't get it at all. So we had people who were turned down for EIDL because of their credit, but they didn't get the advance either, which makes no sense because the advance didn't have to be paid back. So it makes no sense that they would be turned down based on credit. So this it appears, now remember, we still need guidance to come out from the SBA. It appears to fix that for at least some borrowers, not all. So under this new round of the EIDL, you have to be a qualified small business, 300 or fewer employees, and you have to be located in a low-income community, and you have to have had an revenue impact, and I'm speaking off the top of my head here, I believe a 30% or more. Sorry, I don't have the article right in front of me that I wrote, but we do have this article on the NAV blog. So if you qualify, then you can actually request to get the full $10,000. So now of the grant. So this is interesting. So we're going to watch how the SBA comes out with the rules, but it looks like there's going to be some additional money for those who applied for an EIDL grant, including those who were turned down and didn't get it, or those who didn't get the EIDL money because the funds were exhausted. So the grant money ran out before everybody who had requested a grant was screened or qualified for it. So again, we're going to keep an eye on what's going on with that. We have the article on the NAV blog, nav.com/blog, and we'll update that as soon as we get new information from the SBA. That's the overview. I hope you found this helpful. We're happy to continue to answer your questions as best we can and at least point you in the direction as we learn more information from the SBA that will help you become eligible. Now, one more thing I need to tell you, and that is, where do you get these new PPP loans? Well, NAV is going to help you. So at NAV, we will be matching borrowers to lenders who are making these loans. And we have lending partners who have been gearing up all month in anticipation of this legislation, and they're ready to go. They're ready. We just need the president to sign the bill. We need the official SBA portal to open up, and they can start taking applications. So if you do not already have a free NAV account, you can just go to nav.com. You'll see a Get Started button right there. Sign up for a free account. We'll notify you as soon as they're available. And then you can get in that queue and hopefully get the stimulus funds that your business needs. There is also pandemic unemployment extended. There's going to be SBA debt relief continued or extended. So if you have an SBA loan not in one of these programs, there will be an extension where the SBA pays the principal and interest up to $9,000 a month for those loans. So there are also some additional small business relief that will be helpful for small business owners, but at least hopefully that gave you an overview of what's coming up. All right, thanks for joining me. I hope you're able to get the stimulus relief that your small business needs, and we'll be here to try to help as best we can.